A fisherman is minding his own business when a wild dolphin surfaces next to his boat, pushing something toward him. He braces for trash, maybe a fish. Instead, it's a baby dolphin, tangled and barely breathing. The mother is right there, watching, waiting like she already knows exactly which species on this planet might actually be able to help. That's not an accident, that's a pattern. And it happens on every continent, in species that have nothing else in common. Here's the question that should bother you more than it does. Every wild animal on Earth is running on the same basic operating system. Fear us, avoid us, stay away. We've spent 10,000 years hunting, trapping, and displacing basically everything with a pulse. And yet, over and over, in species that share nothing biologically, we see the opposite. We see trust. Specifically, at the exact moment it matters most when a baby's life is on the line. So let's actually dig into why. Because it's not one tidy explanation. It's a stack of overlapping reasons, and by the end of this, you might start looking at your own pets a little differently. Start with cats, because if you've ever owned one, you've probably already lived this without realizing it. Feral colonies have a long, well-documented habit of bringing kittens, sometimes injured, sometimes just newborn, directly to specific humans. Not random humans, specific ones. The neighbor who leaves food out. The person who once pulled a thorn from a stray's paw and apparently never got forgiven for it, because now there's a steady stream of kittens showing up like a subscription nobody signed up for. Cats build what researchers call a mental map of safe versus unsafe entities. They watch, they remember. Once a human passes enough silent tests, calm, predictable. Doesn't chase them off with a broom, that human gets reclassified. Not as a threat, as something closer to an extension of the colony. And once you're in that category, you inherit the same protective instincts a mother cat extends to another trusted adult. The kittens don't show up because the cat thinks you're magic. They show up because you already passed a month-long background check you never knew you were taking. Now here's where it gets stranger, because this same test then trust pattern shows up in animals nowhere near as domesticated as a backyard cat colony. Dolphins and whales have an extensive history of approaching boats, specifically when an injured calf is involved, and it doesn't look random. Fishermen have reported mother whales positioning an injured calf directly alongside a boat and simply holding position, waiting. Almost like she's saying, your turn, do the thing you do. Marine biologists point to social complexity as the likely explanation. Dolphin and whale pods already practice cooperative care and coordinated rescue among their own kind. If you already have the wiring to recognize this individual needs help and that individual can provide it, it's apparently not a huge leap to extend that recognition across species lines, especially toward a species that's been floating around in slow, loud, non-threatening boats for generations. There's also a detail that gets overlooked. Human distress responses are remarkably gentle. Slow movements, quiet voices, careful hands. Animals read body language extremely well. A species that consistently responds to vulnerability with gentleness instead of aggression eventually gets filed under a different category entirely. We're loud, and we're everywhere, sure. But we're also weirdly one of the only species on the planet that regularly goes out of its way to help baby animals that aren't even our own. And apparently, that reputation travels. Birds take this even further, and crows in particular are almost unfair at it. Crows can recognize individual human faces for years. They hold what looks suspiciously like a grudge against people who've wronged them, and something close to loyalty toward people who've helped them. If a crow decides you're one of the good ones, that designation can last basically forever, and it gets passed down. Crow offspring seem to know which humans are safe before ever directly interacting with them themselves, which raises a genuinely interesting possibility. Some of this isn't individual trust at all. It's inherited trust. A young animal raised around a parent who treats a specific human as safe may simply absorb that judgment, the same way a kid absorbs which neighbors are the nice ones without ever being told outright. Then there's domestication, which didn't just change animals physically, it rewired how certain species process trust and dependency altogether. A mother dog who trusts her owner will frequently carry newborn puppies over one at a time and deposit them at that person's feet like she's making a delivery. Dogs have spent roughly 15,000 years evolving alongside us around cooperative care and shared resources. Somewhere deep in dog psychology, humans got filed under pack member with thumbs, and pack members get access to the puppies. It's not a fluke, it's the entire point of how the relationship evolved. And that same wiring occasionally bleeds outward into wild populations. 2 documented cases of wolves, coyotes, and foxes showing unusually low fear around specific humans in areas with long histories of low conflict coexistence. Not domestication exactly, something adjacent to it. There's a sneakier mechanism running underneath almost all of this, and it barely ever gets mentioned: scent. Humans give off a very specific, very recognizable chemical signature somewhere between soap, sweat, food residue, and whatever detergent happens to be popular that decade. Animals with strong scent-based memory, which is most mammals, can apparently catalog a specific human's smell the same way they'd catalog the scent of a trusted member of their own group. Once a person's scent gets filed under safe and predictable, it can stick in an animal's memory for an absurdly long time. That's part of why some of these baby delivering moments happen with animals that have only had a handful of prior interactions with the human in question. The background check isn't always visual. Sometimes it's entirely done by nose, long before the animal ever sees you clearly. There's also something happening on our end that we rarely give ourselves credit for. Humans are strangely, almost suspiciously good at recognizing distress calls from species we've never even encountered before. A crying human infant and a distressed puppy trigger the same instinctive reaction in adult humans' heart rate spikes, attention locks in, you feel a pull to go investigate. Some researchers think that sensitivity isn't limited to our own species' babies. It might be a broader, somewhat leaky caretaking instinct that occasionally fires for other species young too. And if animals have picked up on the fact that we consistently answer distress with help instead of aggression, that reputation becomes something worth exploiting, even across species lines. But elephants might be the most emotionally devastating example in this entire topic. And I say that fully aware I've spent this whole video with a fairly goofy tone. Elephants have famously enormous memory and deep multi-generational bonds. There are documented cases of elephant herds approaching conservationists and rangers with injured or orphaned calves, standing back, and waiting sometimes for hours, clearly anticipating help. Think about what that means for a second. An animal choosing to sit with its fear and wait, betting its baby's life on the idea that you specifically will do the right thing. Elephants have been observed recognizing former caretakers after a decade of separation, responding with something that looks a lot like genuine emotional recognition. If an elephant can hold on to a positive memory of one specific human for 10 plus years, it's not exactly shocking that the same elephant would eventually decide you're a safe option when a calf needs help. Primates take this somewhere almost uncomfortably close to home. There are documented cases of wild and semi-wild chimpanzees, bonobos, and monkeys in areas with long-term research stations bringing injured or orphaned infants toward familiar human researchers. That's less surprising once you consider how closely primate social cognition mirrors our own. Primates already practice something researchers call alloparenting, where infants get cared for not just by their biological mother, but by a wider network of trusted group members, aunts, older siblings, sometimes unrelated adults, who've proven themselves reliable over time. Extending that same logic toward a long-term, consistently non-threatening human observer isn't actually that big a cognitive leap. If a troop has spent years watching a researcher behave calmly and predictably, that researcher effectively gets absorbed into the troop's mental map of acceptable, infant-adjacent adults, a wildly specific category to earn membership in, but apparently achievable with enough patience and zero sudden movements. There's a name for the bigger idea tying all of this together: the human safe haven hypothesis. The theory is that across multiple independently evolved social species, individual animals can form something structurally similar, though obviously not as deep to the attachment bond between a human infant and a caregiver. Animals with this kind of bond don't just tolerate a specific human. They actively seek them out during moments of stress, the same way a frightened toddler runs toward a parent instead of away from danger. And it's worth noting, this pattern shows up specifically around medical necessity, not casual bonding. Animals don't bring their babies to humans to hang out. They bring them when something is visibly, urgently wrong. That's not blind trust. That's closer to outsourcing a problem to a specialist, which is a genuinely impressive move for a species whose entire evolutionary programming says, keep strangers away from your offspring. Now, the honest caveat, because this isn't universal, and it's definitely not unconditional. Animals with consistently negative human contact, hunted populations, heavily persecuted species, high conflict areas show essentially none of this behavior. This pattern shows up almost exclusively in populations with a history of low-conflict coexistence, or individual positive past experiences, or species with the memory and social cognition to make case-by-case judgments instead of judging our species as a whole. In other words, animals aren't trusting humanity in general, they're trusting you. Specifically, the one who left food out, who moved slowly and quietly the last time something wild and unexpected showed up. And it compounds. A human responds well to one distress situation, the animal or its social group remembers, and future generations inherit a slightly lower baseline fear of that human or humans like them. Small, accumulated, repeated evidence, case by case. Until a wild animal eventually looks at a human and concludes, yeah, this one's probably fine. Hand over the baby. So why do animals bring babies to humans? Not because we've earned some universal trust from the animal kingdom, our track record is genuinely too messy for that. It's because across an enormous range of species, individual animals have built individual case files on individual humans. And enough of us keep passing the test. Every slow approach to an injured animal, every bowl of food left out for a stray, every quiet response to something wild and frightened becomes a tiny data point in a ledger we don't even know we're contributing to. And once in a while, when the stakes are highest, that ledger gets cashed in and a fisherman ends up holding a baby dolphin, wondering how on earth he became the chosen one. Turns out, he wasn't chosen randomly at all. Somewhere along the way, despite everything, he earned it. There's one more layer to this that almost never makes it into the conversation, and it might be the most quietly important part of the whole thing. This behavior changes us too. Rangers and conservationists who've experienced it firsthand frequently describe it as one of the most meaningful moments of their careers, a kind of confirmation that the slow, often thankless work of building trust with wild populations actually means something on the other end. Conservation programs have started studying these trust-based interactions not just as heartwarming anecdotes, but as real indicators of ecosystem health. A wild population willing to approach humans during a crisis is usually a population living somewhere with lower hunting pressure and a longer track record of coexistence rather than conflict. In a strange way, these moments function as an informal report card on how well humans in a given region have actually been behaving toward the wildlife around them. So the next time you hear about a dolphin nudging an injured calf toward a boat, or a stray cat parading kittens onto someone's porch, don't file it away as just a wholesome animal video. File it away as proof that every once in a while, across a planet full of species that have every reason to fear us, we've somehow managed to convince a few of them that we were worth the risk.